Our first speaker this afternoon is going to be Suzanne Cahill, who is Professor Emerita of Chinese History at the University of California in San Diego. Suzanne is probably well known to you as the author of a fabulous book on Xiwangmu. And she's also, at least sort of in my radius, has been in my radius for her work on bronze mirrors, Taoist themes on bronze mirrors, Chinese bronze mirrors. But I invited her because I know she's been working for a long time on the debates over dress and chariots in the Tang histories. And so I asked her to possibly connect that to the Sanli too. And that's what she will do today. She's trying to do today. So she will talk about an urgent matter of cosmic harmony, citing the ritual classics in Tang court arguments over dress. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Thank you for that nice introduction, and also thank you for the invitation that kind of got me back into this project that I'm really having fun with. This is a picture from the Sanli too of the robe I'm going to be talking about that was debated in whether it should be abolished in the Han court. So it's called the Great Fur Robe, and it doesn't look very furry. You know, when I told my husband this was the Great Fur Robe, he said, "That's not fur." So you can see, you know, the whole theme about not a lot of detail that we've been talking about. So here's the title. I stuck my email down there if you want to get back to me with corrections or comments. And the reason it's called an urgent matter of cosmic harmony is that the treatises on clothing and vehicles in the Tang histories very directly link clothing and vehicles and people having the correct ones to the mandate of heaven and to cosmic harmony. And I'm going to talk about citing the ritual classics in the debates and the same ritual classics that the Sanli too is based on. So what I want to talk about is a little tiny introduction on the treatise in the Old Tang history, and then maybe try to stretch a relation to the Sanli too, and then talk about values and organization of the treatise. And then the main thing I'm going to do is to examine a debate over whether they should abolish the emperor's outfit that's known as the Great Fur Headwear Ensemble. I'll explain that title in a minute, but it's probably the longest coverage of any debate about clothing in the treatises, and the most heated, and cites the ritual classics the most. So the officials at court were using the ritual classics as well as other things to argue their case. So that's what I want to talk about. So the treatise up there on the top, the treatise on vehicles and clothing, is drawn 45 in the Old Tang history, and the authors, Liu Xu and others as well, completed in 945, 121 sections long. It's quite a long work. So comparing it in the next slide to the Sanli too, which is written around the same time under some of the same circumstances, and then both of them go back to the three ritual classics, the Li Ji, the Yi Li, and the Zhou Li. And I'm just basing, I took the date of the 2nd century BC from Michael Nyland and Michael Lowy, so I'm not willing to fight to the death over that date. I know it's still very controversial. Okay, so commonalities between the Sanli too and the treatise on clothing, vehicles and clothing. They have completely, they have very different purposes and completely different organization. But they do have some things in common, especially what they're concerned about, which is the legitimacy and power of the ruling family, and the use of these material culture items to establish stable social hierarchies, and also just the centrality of ritual, as we've been talking about repeatedly, to order and to civilization. They also share problems. The biggest problem, the distance in time from the ritual classics. They share a lack of physical evidence, something that in modern times we've been getting a lot more of, so we can make better, more accurate comparison. They also share sometimes misunderstanding or losing the actual referent that's mentioned in the ritual classics. So, you know, they may have the word, but they may not know what the thing actually was. And then in both texts, the text itself is vague, and people have been suggesting that's on purpose to allow some flexibility, etc. So the treatise on vehicles and clothing. What is this thing? Well, vehicles and clothing, they're linked because they're both visual symbols of wealth and power. And they're visual symbols that reflect and make obvious the user's identity and the user's place in the social hierarchy. So if you know the code of clothing and vehicles, you can walk into a huge court gathering, in the palace where everybody's there, and you can instantly know, who's important, what their importance is, what their position is. It's a code that can be read, and that's what's written in the treatises. So the vehicles and clothing are subject to government regulations, something like sumptuary laws, but the treatises aren't laws, of course. And the regulations in the treatise emerge from and express the state's concern with legitimacy and power. So the state wants to control access to goods, who can have what, and they also want to control the system of signs. What does this chariot mean? What does this robe mean? The treatise itself is a prescriptive text. That is, it's representing kind of an ideal world of the way things should be, that is characterized by human and cosmic order and harmony. And it's prescription in the treatise through description. So it'll have a long list of chariots and then tell you who can drive them, and then it'll have a long list of clothing and tell you who can wear it. So it'll describe it, but it's also sort of saying who can have access and who can't. So part of my argument is that the right clothes are a good omen, and when you have good omens, the mandate of heaven is safe. And by the same token, they identify potential threats to order, and there's a lot of these, and I'm just going to talk about maybe 1.5 of them today. But things like breaking classical precedents, which would, if you abolish the great fur robes, that would be breaking classical precedents. Also appropriation of high status clothing by low status people, and also foreign clothing. So just like the right clothes are a good omen, the wrong clothes are a bad omen, and the mandate is threatened. So the stakes in this are really high. We think maybe it's just fashion, but actually it really matters because the wrong clothes threaten the universe of the order. And when we're talking about the emperor's clothes, then the stakes, of course, are the highest of all. So just to make a little link of the cosmic importance of clothing, to begin with, the treatise just assumes that social and cosmic hierarchies are natural, good, and orderly. Nobody would ever argue for equality or anything like that at this time and place. So hierarchies are natural, and order in the state correlates to cosmic order. So it's what we can see on the ground of order in the universe. Control of the symbols and the ranks shows that there's order in the state, and state order shows that the ruling dynasty has the mandate. And disruptions in the symbols are disruptions of the mandate. So the wrong clothing is disruption of the symbol system. And then you have a cascade effect. Somebody wears the wrong thing, you end up, with universal chaos. It's like, So yeah, you know the feeling, right? Right. So how is it organized? It's organized rather differently from the Sanli too. The clothing, and I'm just talking about clothing now, I'm leaving the vehicles out. Clothing is listed in social order, starting with the emperor, and then you go on down to the little guy who's taking care of the water clocks in the palace. It goes all the way down. And within individual entries for each social level, so for the emperor, for example, you would have his ensembles, his outfits in order of the occasion, from the most ceremonial to the least formal. So you'd start with his, great sacrificial type wear, and you'd end up with what he's wearing when he's lolling around his private parts of the living quarters. Each entry is also relentlessly hierarchical. I hope you're seeing a theme here of hierarchy. The outfits are described hierarchically from the top to the bottom. So you start with the hat and you go down to the shoes, and that's just repeated over and over again in every single outfit. And from the highest and most honored outfits to the lowest and least honored ones, and from heaven, in the hat, to the shoes on the earth. And the ensembles, this is something I didn't understand at first. It took me a long time to get this, that they're identified by the headwear. So it'll start off saying, the great fur headwear, and then the next 2 paragraphs will be, it has facing on the sleeves, and that's green, and it has this and that, and you're like, wait a minute. I didn't know we were talking about robes. So each outfit is identified what's at the top of it, the hat. Okay, so identified by headwear and function from ritual to leisure. So this is the conflict, the case I want to talk about. Conflict and resolution. I want to tell you about what happened and then how they solved it. So there's a request from a whole bunch of really important ministers at the court of Gaozong to abolish the great fur headwear ensemble and to replace it with what I'm calling is different from, I think Francois calls it the dynastic sacrificial ensemble, but I didn't have the book yet. So, and these are kind of placeholders. I'm not sure I'll end up with these exact titles. But anyway, replace it with a full formal headwear ensemble. So the great fur one is first in the emperor's clothing, and the full formal is second. So they're two very important outfits. And this, as I said, is the longest discussion in the treatise, which suggests how important it was, how much importance they gave it. So just tiny little sections I took out of the two ensembles. From the great fur headwear, we have the headwear had no fringes. That's really important in the argument later. I won't get to that part of it, but they're always talking about you need to have fringes or it's not a real crown. The accompanying robe was made of black lambskin. And then the emperor wore this ensemble when sacrificing to the deities of the heavens and the spirits of earth. This is the description from the treatise. Okay, this is, and it's just a little bit of it, the beginning and the end. Then the full formal headwear ensemble says, from the headwear hung 12 strands of white beads, which we could say pearls. He wore black garments and dark red lower garments, together bearing the 12 insignia, which is also going to be important. And another thing I'm not going to get into, that having the 12 insignia on the robes was something they were very attached to. Okay, full formal headwear. And he wore this when he performed various offerings and sacrifices. And there's a long list, I don't have the whole list, including those at the ancestral temple, and when he sent off supreme commanders, returned from battle, ascended the throne, married, or received the court on New Year's Day. So arguing that this is going to replace the great fur headwear is sort of collapsing all the most important ceremonies and giving them to this one costume. So here's again the great fur headwear from the Sanli too, and you can see there's no strings of beads hanging. You can see that there's no insignia, but it doesn't really look that furry, at least not to me. And then here's the full formal headwear, and you can see the pearls or the beads hanging from his hat. You can see the insignia all over the robe, and they're very symbolically important. Each one of them has a meaning about the emperor and how his body and his duties sort of represent the universe. Okay, so what's the problem if somebody's trying to get rid of the great fur headwear outfit? So the great fur outfit appears in the ritual classics. I'll get to that in a second. That's a problem because you don't want to toss out the ritual classics. The great fur outfit is listed first in the long list of imperial outfits in the treatise, and the full formal one is the second. And that list in turn derives from the Fuyi Ling, which is orders on garments and clothing, which they claim is based on the Zhou Li that was presented to Gaozi, the founder, in 618 to 627, and that's taken as authoritative thereafter. So whenever anybody wants to change something that's in the Fuyi Ling, they have to come up with really good reasons. As they say it's claimed it's based on the Zhou Li, but it's actually based on Sui dynasty practices. Whoops. Okay, so they construct this argument that's very clever, and I want to talk about that. So the authors of the treatise, and that is the whole treatise as a whole, and also of this individual memorial suggesting abolishing this robe, use a whole bunch of different strategies to argue the issue and then to settle the conflicts that come up, and then help Gaozong to decide, because he's going to have to make the initial decision. So first, way back in the very beginning of the treatise, in the Han, in the very second section, they talk about Han practices, and I'll get to that in a second. The memorial itself is in sections 35 and 36. So we heard about the Han case a long time ago, and now we're coming to this argument. So then in the memorial, they argue by citing the ritual classics, and they discover, to nobody's surprise, that they are both authoritative, that is, they have to cite them, but they're also inconsistent. And they mention practical matters. There's a really hilarious argument in there about how it's just way too hot to wear the furs in summer, so that just won't work. And then they cite precedent. So there's this long list I won't bore you with of what everybody did, the Han and all the other dynasties after that, and how they all solved it the way we want you to solve it, Your Majesty. And then they claim to follow the classics, despite the classics disagreeing with each other. So they just claim they're following it. And then, just to be completely inconsistent, they decide that some Zhou practices are obsolete, and that we're following them, but really we don't have to follow them, seems to be the argument. And then the subtext is that, and this is especially true after the Anlushan rebellion in Tang, they become very anxious about their foreign connections and foreign pollution. So they think that fur is ugly, foreign, and ill-omened. Okay, so here's back to section 2, the Han practices. So the treatise, authors of the treatise say, for clothing, the Han emperors had the outfit topped by the full formal headwear. After Emperor Ming, who took a lot of interest in clothing, the rulers of successive dynasties did not wear the outfit capped with a great fur headwear anymore. So it's like we're already set up to know how this is going to come out. Right? When we read the Han thing, we're like, okay, they're going to get rid of that. They already got rid of that. Okay, so then in the memorial that the guys present, in citing the ritual classics, here's very much shortened again. It's not a short passage, but it's saying, in sacrificing to the grand thearch of the vast heavens, the emperor wears the great fur robe and headwear. Then presenting offerings to former rulers, he wears the full formal headwear ensemble. So here we have a classic that seems to say, okay, great fur headwear for the top stuff, full formal for everything after that, or for the important stuff after that. And now moving to the Li Ji, we have the section that's sometimes translated single sacrifice in the suburbs. It's a single animal sacrifice in the suburbs. It's a really important sacrifice. And it says in there, when the Zhou first began the single victim suburban sacrifice, it was at the winter solstice. And the emperor wore the full formal ensemble to symbolize heaven, putting on the headwear with 12 suspended fringes because 12 was the number of heaven. So here they're saying, okay, Li Ji says he wore the full formal ensemble. He didn't wear the great fur. And then the Yueling says, also in Li Ji, during the first month of winter, the son of heaven begins to wear furs. This is really hedging it, because it doesn't say he's wearing the great fur ensemble. It just says he's wearing furs, And anyway, so we don't know exactly what they're talking about. So how do we resolve these contradictions? We see, first of all, the ritual texts don't agree with each other. And then this is a quote from the treatise. The authors of the treatise are, bringing these classics out, and both of those quotes from the Zhou Li and from the Li Ji, those are quotes from the Zhou Li and Li Ji that are quoted by the authors of the treatise, of the petitions in the treatise. So the petition says the two ritual texts in discussing the Zhou suburban sacrifice both mention the great fur headwear ensemble and the full formal ensemble, but they have some differences on the matter. So, the implication I think we're meant to draw is that the petitioners, since the ritual classics are in disagreement, the petitioners can pick what they'd like to pick, or they're going to argue that. And then there's the one I mentioned a minute ago, that the great fur is ridiculously unsuitable for sacrifice in all seasons. And they go through this long thing about how miserable the emperor would be, in the heat of summer, standing on the altarpiece and wearing this thing, and we wouldn't want to do that to the emperor. And then, as I said, they listed all the Han through Sui imperial precedents, claiming that the rulers all wore the full formal ensemble. And then at the end of that thing, they completely ignore the fact that some of the texts have talked about wearing the fur outfit, and say, so, the conclusion of all this list of dynastic practices is the comprehensive compendia of 100 rulers had no inconsistencies with or opposition to what is recorded in the text, ritual texts and classics, after they've just told you the inconsistencies. So it's like, okay. And then this is where they claim some of the Zhou Li is obsolete, and compare it to the obsolete practices, or ridiculing the great fur headdress. So wearing the great fur headdress ensemble would be like the practices of the Zhou officials responsible for overturning birds' nests, expelling frogs, and exterminating crickets. Such matters are no longer carried out. This is why since the Han, Wei, and Sui dynasties, among the old precedents that have been passed down, we have only retained the use of the full formal headwear ensemble. So there's just all kinds of different arguments in there, including sort of inconsistent and contradictory ones about using the ritual classics. And then this is something that I've studied at length elsewhere, so I didn't want to stop and give enough examples to make, to fully bring this out, but after the Anlushan Rebellion, I would argue that fur is seen as something that's foreign and loathsome and ill-omened. And it wasn't just after the Anlushan Rebellion, during the Six Dynasties, there's several omen texts and stuff that talk about fur as something bad, but this is one of my favorites from the Chongyi, the record of looking for spirits. So during the Great Abundance era, everybody took to wearing felt hats, felt turbans, felt belts, and felt cinches around their leggings. Thereupon people began teasing one another. China will soon be broken by barbarians, and in fact, it was. Now, felt is a product manufactured by barbarians. Felt is made from fur, so felt is fur. And if everybody began restricting his head, his waist, and his crotch with felt, then the barbarians were pressing the Chinese on 3 vital sectors. Would this not soon lead to decline in the central kingdom? So it's like they've got their clutches around our vital parts. We're toast. And then this is just a poem from Yuanzhan, who was writing well after the Anlushan Rebellion, just to give you an idea of how people felt about fur. But he says, ever since foreign horsemen began raising dust and dirt, fur and fleece, rank and rancid, have filled Shenyang, and Shenyang is another name for Chang'an, and Luoyang. Our women are acting like foreigners' wives, studying foreign makeup, and entertainers present foreign sounds, servants to foreign music. And then, of course, the assumption that embroidered and woven silk is beautiful and proper, and all of the rest of the emperor's outfits are embroidered and woven silk, except his mourning garments, which are simpler. So then, what happened? Well, Emperor Gaozong, at the end of all this dramatic, presentations, he ordered 2 outfits to be made for him, and he tried them on, and he considered the great fur ensemble too rough and simple, and so discontinued it. So that's the end of the story. Gaozong decided, they had all these lengthy arguments, but in the end, it was a practical thing. He tried it on, didn't like it, and that was that. So, and then here's Ma Lin's, or attributed to Ma Lin, the full formal outfit as it's, sort of seen thereafter. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Will we have time for questions? No time?
Who initiated the questioning of the protocols?
Let's see, Zhang Wuji, and some other people, but he was the main, a very important minister who had been the minister of the emperor before, one of the most important people at court, and then some other really important ministers. They're the ones who did it.
How do you think we should reevaluate those paintings that had the very gauzy outfit that seem to be made with silk rather than heavy material? The first seem to be very little, like, at least from my encountering, very few of them are actually using those to cover women's body.
The fur looked really simple, didn't it? Like a much simpler thing. And then the silk ones, when you read the whole description in the treatise, it's very elaborate, and they even go through all the insignia. So it may not be as kind of light as the, in fact, they talk about some heavy weave silk. So it may not be as light as the later pictures, but the insignia and the pearls hanging down from the headwear are the same as what we see later. Yeah. In fact, there's another whole debate about the insignia where somebody wants to change those, but that didn't happen.
So really fascinating presentation. I have a bunch of questions, but I think I'll just ask one for right now.
Okay.
With the rhetoric of the sort of rhetorical position of saying there's all these inconsistencies, not resolving them, and then saying you've resolved them all. One of the things that's interesting that happens in the Sanli too is that Nie Chongyi will articulate in writing controversies that he doesn't actually resolve in writing,
Yeah.
but then resolves in picture.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if there's a way in which we might reconfigure what we understand to be the resolution of controversy
Yeah.
in the context of this kind of ritual this sort of ritual rhetoric. And this is just a question of, do you see a sort of a format where you sort of demonstrate that you considered all the options by listing all the classical precedent, and then you don't actually have to resolve it,
No,
you just sort of...
Yeah, you just make your decision.
That was more of a statement than a question, but I'm just curious if that's actually something that seems like it's been supported by what you've been reading.
Yeah, totally, I think it is. I mean, I think the fact that that one little statement about, we went through all these emperors' practices and nothing was inconsistent with the classics was just kind of a covering over of what happened. And actually, there's a lot more citations in the Liqi and the Zhou that would have, there's one thing that says the great fur headdress outfit is not old, is not ancient, but they didn't cite that. And there's another one, well, anyway, there's other ones that would have cited, would have worked on either side of the arguments, and they're not mentioned. I think they mentioned a few, it's like, this is maybe the presenting of the memorial is itself a ritual, and part of that ritual is I cite the classics to make my argument.
Just some to intersperse here. The question of Jeffries was interesting in relation to the image that you showed of the fur robe, and the notion that we can't really actually see it as fur.
Yeah.
So maybe the image here with the robes too does sort of resolve things for Nie Chongyi. He depicts it, but it doesn't look furry,
Right.
and so it doesn't come across as somebody who's
A lot of pelt and spots and stuff.
But didn't you say the fur they're referring to and the fur of you would have been felt, which doesn't look?
No, I was just putting felt together with fur, since felt is made of fur, when I was talking about the Chinese.
I thought maybe that's what they meant, was felt, that felt would have been
Oh,
used.
no, they talk about lamb's wool, and lamb's fleece is something you can make felt out of, but they say, a baby lamb's wool is what the coat's made out of, maybe black lamb.
Oh, I was thinking of just wearing the skin part on the outside and fur part fur part against the body.
Yeah,
And with
then it
with
wouldn't
an
look all
edge.
shaggy. Yeah, that would work.
But would silk have been much more expensive to produce than fur? I should think so.
Yeah, it might have been, but I don't think that was an
I mean,
issue.
that wouldn't have been a...
That wouldn't have mattered.
No,
I mean,
to
that's
them.
even better, the emperor's got the most.
Well, yeah, no, kind
Yeah.
of higher prestige in
Yeah,
some
yeah,
odd
silk
way.
definitely becomes much more prestigious, sure.
Jonathan?
The foreign that was fascinating to hear about the foreign connotations of the great fur robe, and it makes perfect sense. But wouldn't there also have been historical associations of it, a kind of evocation of a very ancient
Yes.
moment?
Well, I think
Could
that's
you
why.
speak a little bit about that aspect
Yeah, I
of it?
think that's why it has the authority that it does. They
Right.
can't just say, oh, this stuff is barbaric, let's get rid of it. Because, there's the poem in the Shijing that has about the different ranks of people wearing different kinds of fur. And so, and the Yueling, which is, something that everybody knew, what do we do in what month? And, in the winter, he starts to wear fur as well. He is interpreted as the emperor, but it's not always that clear. So yeah, I think there's a lot of resonance for fur. And so that's why it wasn't so easy to just say, come to court and say, let's get rid of this. And okay, let's get rid of it.
Is there any connection to Fuxi?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
I ask it because sometimes depictions of Fuxi involve fur.
Fur, yeah. Sitting on fur, yeah. Yeah. I'll think about that.
And so maybe the primitive rather than the barbarian.
Right. Well, it's like there's the ancient, attested, revered fur, and then there's the, rank and rancid stuff that these people who are giving us all this trouble on our borders. And our women are, another whole part of the thing that I didn't get into, but I'd love to, is women are wearing foreign fashions. Women are cross-dressing in foreign men's fashions. And that just has everybody hysterical. So it's kind of like there's, in other sections, there's clear loathing of the barbarian, of the foreigners. And the section on the northern way said the northern way's dress and vehicles were very disordered. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.